Climate change. It's real, it's serious, and it's up to us to solve it.
So many of us are here today is a recognition that the threat from climate change is serious, it is urgent, and it is growing.
It all sounds very green. The Environment Secretary Ed Davey has been urging other countries to get serious about tackling climate change.
Dear next president, climate change is the most serious problem facing humankind.
We are here all together because we know that the world needs to fight climate change with much, much greater seriousness.
Madam Vice President, you're in charge of the environment for the Iranian government. That's your portfolio. How serious is your government when it comes to tackling climate change, taking serious measures?
Yes, our government is very serious because we adopted a low-carbon economy last year in the government, and we started working in that direction.
Earth's climate is now changing faster than at any point in the history of modern civilization, primarily as a result of human activities, and that climate change could kill thousands of Americans and cost the U.S. economy hundreds of billions of dollars. Pretty seriously. Pretty serious. And you seriously may have missed it because even though the report was supposed to come out in December, the Trump administration released it Friday.
Show you the latest satellite, really impressive. You can see that well-defined eye 20 miles across right now. It's slowly moving into the Bahamas. Here's another view of it. You can see down into the storm and look at all that convection happening around the eye wall. That's where we're seeing wind gusts in excess of 180 miles an hour. Matter of fact, 185 was the highest we saw here. West movement still at 8, just like last night, but the pressure is a lot lower. It was 945 millibars, now 934. The lower the number, the stronger the storm. Now, as it slows down, as it loses some of the steering currents, it could stall a little bit and then start to make that forward motion and start to accelerate. That timing on that stall and the slowdown and the turn to the north is completely key, because if it's delayed, it could be farther inland here and actually make a landfall. If it turns a little sooner, it could be on this side of the cone, which would keep it well out to sea. So there's a lot of variables right now. We just have to be prepared, especially if you have interest along our coastline, for the potential of a hurricane moving right along our coast as we get into Thursday this coming week. This is the European model, keeping it over open waters and really close to our coastline as we get into Thursday night into early Friday morning, exiting the area. The seas are going to be huge. Along the coastline, we're going to have 12, 14-foot seas. We're going to have some beach erosion. The biggest swells are going to be offshore, but we're going to have some issues on the outer banks as well if this storm does verify and move that close. Rainfall is going to be what we call a tight gradient, from not much rain at all to significant amounts. So this is the European model, and don't take these numbers as a forecast just yet. I just want to show you, when we have a compact storm like this, we really are dealing with a short gradient. Here's the GFS, very similar. It's more bullish on the amounts, but you get the idea, from hardly anything to quite a bit of rain. So any deviation one way or the other can be a huge difference on what to expect.
So this is what the president obviously has on his mind as he heads to Missouri and tries to move forward with some of the agenda. It's an obvious man-made, I mean, not man-made, natural, incredible disaster that Texas is dealing with.
Who is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion, though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers, really, to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it.
My son and a couple of my other employees were in that building, and the water just poured around the whole building. They had to jump out the back window. Some survived, some didn't.
The official death toll in the Bahamas rose to 43, but Bahamian officials are still waiting to see what the total destruction of Dorian will be. Dorian made landfall in the Bahamas on August 26th. After the Category 5 storm ravaged through the Bahamas for more than a week, massive amounts of debris have piled up on the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama. Hundreds of people are still missing, and as debris is moved, Bahamian Prime Minister Hubert Manus says the death toll will rise significantly. CNN reported residents said they could see family and neighbors being swept away by floodwaters. What were once homes have been completely flattened by the strongest storm to ever hit the Bahamas, and more than 70,000 people are reportedly homeless and displaced because of storm damage. In an interview with MSNBC, Bahamian Health Minister Dwayne Sand said the public, quote, needs to prepare for unimaginable information about the death toll and the human suffering. Dorian made its way to the U.S. along the East Coast, but has weakened to a post-tropical cyclone since it made contact in Nova Scotia, Canada on Saturday.
You can see the chemtrails coming out of the engines here. Look at that. I'm dying to take a picture of that's cool. My neighbor, you got it. So chemtrail gen, I'm doing the video. Chemtrail generators are on. And yeah, there it is. Look, you can see them. All right, that's awesome. It's working.
Yeah.
We're Earth Shield. You might not know our name, but you've seen us fly in your skies almost every day. And what is our job? Protecting you. You see, the Earth is a dangerous place, and without Earthshield's patented barium formula protecting you, well, I wouldn't like to think of the consequences. You wouldn't send your kids out to play without a thorough coating of sunscreen. Well, just think of us as a gigantic tube of planetary SPF 60. You say, doesn't this cost the taxpayers millions, if not billions of dollars to continually spray our atmosphere? Well, of course it does. But we are committed to keeping your planet preserved and fresh. Just see for yourself how a well-placed stream of our new and improved Earth Shield grows and expands for maximum coverage. That's because we don't just use any barium in our products. We use the finest barium from the ancient barium mine.
And here we're going to get into how all of a sudden Hurricane Irma suddenly makes a right-hand turn, signals, and goes straight up to Florida like no hurricane has ever done before. And they were predicting it over a week ago. So massive numbers of East Coasters came to the West Coast based on storms. This only exacerbated fuel shortage in the West. Seeing officials saying to people to make final evacuations now just seems silly. 6.5 million people told to evacuate the entire state of Florida. After checking with people within the recovery and process, everything is closing at 8 p.m. tonight, and there's no plans for opening anything until Tuesday. That's 4 days of severe hunkering down. The earliest fuel shipments I could confirm anticipated to arrive on Wednesday of next week. That's right when the next Jose is supposed to hit. Day after that, apparently. That's 5 days of self-sufficient fuel. Power is going to be a big issue. If the path is anything like current projections, we can anticipate a power outage in Florida, breaking all known records. Once again, the geographical dynamic means the southernmost impact zone will be without power the longest, and without fuel the longest. As a rough guess, based entirely on driving around and paying attention, it would appear that 25% of homesteads are not prepared at all, 50% of those observed in the regions are moderately prepared, and 25% appear generally well prepared. I would estimate the number of people fully comprehending what might take place over the next 5-10 days, let's make that a couple weeks at least, knowledge of how to move forward is in the 3 to 5% range. That's about the same range of the general population who are considered to be, quote, preppers. Those who fail to prepare to get... I don't want to say it. Jose, still a dangerous Category 4 hurricane, threatens second blow to Irma-ravaged islands. This is coming in right behind Irma. They've got them set up, folks. I'm going to show how this storm's just bringing to your attention that these have been tracking hurricanes for a very long time. 1948, the military had their Air Force Hurricane Hunters. And look at the coast, 1, 2, 3, 4, going up the coast. We'll get into that a little more. Mexico, poor Mexico, man, is hit by a tropical storm, Katia, less than 24 hours after devastating 8.1 magnitude. I'd like to be interested in what the word Katia means. It sounds like a Spanish name. Poor people down there, say a prayer for them. In Florida is nearing 10 years with no hurricanes. This is from 2015. But before that, the last hurricane to make landfall in Florida was Wilma on October 24th, 2005. Florida's current hurricane-free streak dwarfs the previous record dating to 1851, which was 5 consecutive seasons from 1980 to 1984. This is almost a 10-year period without a hurricane in Florida is rather remarkable, given the state has 1,260 miles of coastline, unless you take in the fact that all weather is manipulated and managed. They can make it rain whenever they want it to. All right, let's look at the path of Irma and show why it's the anomaly of all hurricane anomalies, not only being the biggest recorded hurricane on history, the most devastating, the most destructive hitting the Caribbean, but also the strangest path that a hurricane has ever taken before. Let's take a look. All right, so let's get into it. So here's a map from the past 50 years of the major, biggest hurricanes coming from across the Atlantic. Over 50 years, folks. Take a look. Cuba up to Florida. Never has happened before. These are the Cape Verde that are coming from the west coast of Africa, strutting across. But look, and I want to get into this, how it comes to Cuba, and all of a sudden, this thing is going straight as can be. It's been going across the Atlantic in the Cape Verde direction. It's always gone, and then it gets to Cuba. Now it's spinning for 24 hours. It's spinning in Cuba. And here we see it spinning and spinning. All of a sudden, it's stalled out over Cuba for 24 hours. And then all of a sudden, it reaches a big stop sign as soon as it gets to the Gulf and hangs a right angle turn. Out of nowhere, Cinderella story, hurricane never before hit like this before, and it makes a right turn at Cuba. Maybe there was a stop sign. Maybe there was a cop officer of the weather control saying go right. No, there's something else going on, folks. It's weather or manipulation.
Walking down the sidewalk, what do you know? Lines in the sky making tic-tac-toe. Lines getting bigger, cover up the sky. Blocking out the sun, makes me wonder why. Got on the internet to see what I said. Why are they spraying those chemtrails over my chemtrails? Going to a friend's house, driving down the road. Lines in the sky making Morse code. Different kind of spraying, never saw before. Here comes some airplanes, start to make some more. Silvery haze as far as I can see. Why are they spraying those chemtrails over? Chemtrails, 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 chemtrails. Enjoying my holiday, soaking up the sun. Here come the airplanes to ruin my fun. Day was nice, now graffiti in the sky. Everything is ugly, makes me wanna cry. Geoengineering as far as I can see. Why are they spraying those chemtrails over? Chemtrails, chemtrails. This was going to hit Florida a week ago. They predicted it was going to happen, and it happens because they control it. They own the weather. Hurricane hunters have been around for 50 years, folks. They've studied it. They know how to create it. They know how to manipulate it. They can do it from the air. They can do it from the land. And they can do it from the sea. And this is their biggest creation so far. And it's a wet dream for these guys. But look at Hurricane Matthew. Look at Hurricane Irma. None of them have ever made a right turn like this before. It has never happened in the history of weather. This is another clear indication of weather manipulation. I believe this was Katrina coming in, and now we got Katia coming in. Katrina, Katia, same kind of name, pure. I look at it coming up from the Bahamas, Matthew's path coming straight up this way. Came from the south, came across, and then went up. No storms have ever gone Cuba and hung a right, especially in counter-cyclical directions, folks. And let's take a look at the anomalies of the images going on chronicled by Truth Channel.
This image does not, has not, and I don't know if it will match what is actually being reported on the ground. See, when you click on the satellite image information, all you're doing is you're getting this superimposed onto this. I know what this is. We all know what this is. So this is a 150-mile-an-hour hurricane called Irma that's spinning around over Cuba and has been hanging out here for over 24 hours. And for some reason, and this is only from NASA, this is all satellite images come from NASA. Let me repeat this. There is no independent satellite image that is coming from anywhere. It's all from NASA. This is all from one source. But because this is a mosaic, radars are mosaics generally, which means that the information comes from thousands of sources that all get compiled into one. It's just raw data. This is raw data. This is very, very hard to get wrong, because this is what's actually happening on the ground. So let's take a peek at what is actually happening on the ground. We have in Cuba this storm that has been brewing from NASA all day. We see that now there's actually some oomph to it. There's some water in these clouds, these orange bands. This is rain. The rest of the green is just clouds. We have wind speed at 20 miles an hour, okay? And that's right here. Let's go over to Havana. Havana, I gotta actually click on Havana. Havana, Cuba's wind speeds at 8 miles an hour. And this is as of 1:55 a.m. So this was only 10 minutes ago, okay? This information is updating continually. As you can see, these are, you know, this is going, I think, every 5 minutes or so. I don't know, every 10 minutes it looks like. Okay, so let me back up. Now, I got a link from Kafka Winston, a YouTube channel who's, I will provide a link in the notes here. She gave me this. I don't speak Spanish well enough to be able to find the wind speeds and stuff on here. But the image is interesting. It's a very interesting image. It does, in part, match what we're seeing here. So if this is Hurricane Irma, it's not being recorded by their own land recording instruments. The instruments that are feeding into IntelliCast are giving us wind speeds of 8 miles an hour. So if this is a hurricane, which there is a circle here, I don't know why, but there's also a lot of stripes. So before I'm going to give this tons of credibility of being a hurricane simply because there's a circle here, I'm also going to question what the hell are all these stripes. This is a very strange looking storm. And I can't measure it. I can tell you that it does physically look like it's here, although these are clouds. You know, I'm not going to even analyze this, but it does match this picture here, kind of, sort of. But the wind speeds, this whole purpose of me doing this is because this is real-time data that as soon as this browser refreshes, will no longer be available to anybody. So I'm capturing this real time simply for points of reference.
So what this lady who's doing this fine work on the Truth Channel is not being able to put together is the geoengineering using the Doppler NEXRAD radar systems. And here you see them from Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica. You know, you've got Guantanamo Bay right over here run by the United States. And so they can just literally push the storm at a right angle towards Florida. Here's another shot of it. You can see that this is occurring. They have them all set up, ready to go. So here it comes to the MUVR. They start turning on the system, boom, and they can blast it straight up into Florida, right angle hurricanes, most powerful ever, and they'll steer the weather right up into Florida to cause the massive amount of damage being inflicted on a hurricane that's never, ever shown a path like this in history. All of history, folks.
Well, my message to President Trump would be very simple, that the rest of the world is very serious about climate change. So are the scientists. The vast majority of scientists are also very serious about climate change. President Macron of France are calling us in a very urgent way to take climate change seriously because the consequences are unthinkable.
So I'm here today to say that climate change constitutes a serious threat to global security.
We hear it so much that it feels like a buzzword, but it is far from it. Climate change is a real and serious issue. But isn't the climate always changing?
America's on the verge of technological breakthroughs that will enable us to live our lives less dependent on oil. And these technologies will help us be better stewards of the environment. And they will help us to confront the serious challenge of global climate change.
Hollywood, the mainstream media, and even publishers of children's books are using predictive programming and deceptive mind games to normalize and present the appearance of the impossible as orthodox science. Students who question the lines in the sky can be ridiculed and bullied by classmates, teachers, and professors, or even arrested on charges of anti-Semitism, because after 9/11 we know who controls America. So don't look at this, look at that, and we will help you keep your head in the clouds.
Forget being on cloud 9, we are on cloud 12, because that's how many new types of clouds have been added to this historic update coming from meteorologists. I'm a little biased, right? Exciting stuff, guys. All right, so the new types include the Volatus or roll cloud, which has been designated as a whole new species. You can see it gets its name from this long horizontal tube-like shape. Next one up, we have the cavum, or the hole punch cloud. This big circular gap is sometimes caused by aircraft taking off and landing. Very easy to see, right? Makes sense there. And we also have the Asparatus. These are gorgeous. It's actually my favorite. It's kind of looking like it waves while you're underwater. I mean, these are actually beautiful. I mean, check these out. And then finally, we also have the big surfer waves of the Fluctus clouds. These are actually caused by winds above flowing faster than the winds within the cloud itself, so you kind of get that shape. So beautiful, right? There's just a sample of the new additions that we have. Meteorologists, sky watchers, daydreamers, we're all geeking out, guys.
Watching this clueless little actress presenting her scripted propaganda is insulting to intelligent children and adults alike. She is nothing but a robot impersonating a human being, and it is sad and painful to watch to what low mental level she has been reduced to, exceeding record levels of stupidity.
Or the hole punch cloud, this big circular gap, is sometimes caused by aircraft taking off and landing. Very easy to see, right? Makes sense there. Sometimes caused by aircraft taking off and landing. Very easy to see, right? Makes sense there.
No, it doesn't make sense that airplanes are punching holes into clouds during takeoff and landing, you clueless twit.
occasionally the military will put some substances into the atmosphere that are detected by our radar, our weather surveillance radar. It's a substance that's called chaff.
The chaffs do look similar to the oncoming storm system, but they're actually an indication of an aircraft. We replayed the radar images from 8:40 a.m. Turns out several of those chaffs or planes were near the San Diego and Baja areas. Depending on how low and how fast, the planes could have created that sonic boom.
Let's talk about military chaff. You may or may not have heard of this. Now, chaff is something that the aircraft are equipped with. It's a spray that they put out in the atmosphere to confuse ground radars. It's a protection against, say, the radar-guided missiles, okay? So when they're flying these test patterns, they'll chaff the sky, and it shows up on radars. Now, I was looking at my radar wondering, could it have been a flight pattern? Well, here's what happened. I called the National Weather Service, and something interesting here. They confirmed that this, right here, this and this are not rain. That was not rain on our radar. So this is not rain. What is it? Could it have been chaff? Well, we may never know.
That we've been dealing a lot with some military activity in terms of chaff anyway, and that's something that I experienced for the first time yesterday. That was a whole lot of fun, and that's where the military just basically dumps some of the tiny particles of plastic or metal mylar into the atmosphere, and basically they do this when we do already have weather in the area, because it's been around since as long as radar has been around, because that's the shot from yesterday's 6 o'clock show. What they do is try to confuse ground-based Doppler radar systems, and as Mark put it so kindly, ground-based meteorologists. And yes, ladies and gentlemen of the armed forces, it worked well. That's a shot of the mylar. That's a shot of the chaff, again, moving through the atmosphere yesterday. As you can see, a very distinctly different pattern from when a storm system would move through.
Today I'm starting a new series. It's called Odd Watching Geoengineering, and odd means omissions, distortions, and deceptions, because so much is being omitted from the truth movement in geoengineering and chemtrails. We need to start talking about this. And I want to give a huge shout out to Weather Wars 101. It was just a few months ago I started looking into their site and just found so much information. I've been following geoengineering since 2005, and this was all new information for me, so thank you very much. So we're going to cover wet surface air coolers today, Nexrod Doppler along with HAARP, ocean-based water systems, the Silver Lining Project by Bill Gates that makes water vapors to create weather offshore, critical to create the climate because we've completely collapsed the climate, and why they must geoengineer the world or else. And then also the odd characters in watching geoengineering, because as I said, this weather modification history is not having a full story told, and we're just on the cusp of the geoengineering community. David Keith and all the shills that work for the government that's been doing the geoengineering now for decades is about to make it all perfectly legal. So all this legal anti-geoengineering action is going to go by the wayside, and we'll cover that as well. But I just wanted to bring your attention to how much the programming is being done. I mean, here's a picture of the Marriott Hotel, and they've got chemtrail paintings in the background. This is the mind control, folks. We're in desperate mode here. The weather has collapsed. They're increasing the geoengineering ever more intensely. And I'll put in the notes, but study this model. This is what they're doing. This is how they have to do it in order to create weather, because we've collapsed the weather systems. And this is what Weather Wars 101 has been talking about for so long. And this is part of the Silver Lining Project, having to make ocean water vaporization to combine with the cloud condensation nuclei and the barium salts. None of the geoengineering, or few of the geoengineering and chemtrails talk about barium salts at all and why it is necessary in the sky and the chemtrails. But today I want to focus on the wet surface air coolers. These are ground-based water vapor machines creating the water vapor through these machines that are being used to shoot up into the air to combine with the barium being sprayed with the chemtrails and the cloud condensation nuclei to make weather. These are all over the world. Wall Street must go up. It's hitting new record highs, but we're destroying our nest at all costs. And I don't know any other creature that destroys the own nest it lives in but humans. But unfortunately, we're going to have to learn that this is the revenge of Gaia. Nature bats last. She's going to sweat us out of here. And the manipulation of the weather by the geoengineers is only making things worse, much worse, and it's getting accelerated. And all they have, if all they have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So just to drive home a point, you'll find very, very few geoengineering or chemtrail sites that talk about weather modification incorporated. You can see program services, meteorological services, atmospheric assessments, cloud seeding, weather radar systems. That's the Doppler NEXRAD we'll get into at another time. Here's the aircraft everywhere. But they have atmospheric assessments in the clouds, the transformation of invisible atmospheric water vapor to visible droplets governed by nucleation, the character of local aerosols and cloud condensation nuclei. Okay, so you're not hearing that being talked about on all these sites, and folks. And here's another bunch of companies that are sponsored by our state governments for wet surface air coolers, weather modification, Wisconsin. These are all sites that provide wet surface air cooling and other services for geoengineering that are not being covered by nearly all chemtrail and geoengineering sites, and all these people like Freeland and Kirby and these others that are putting out geoengineering books. Okay.
Despite the cost, however, NASA does need to test these engines once in a while. So they built this place in the wetlands of Mississippi. This gave them an imaginary boundary line, and anyone living on the inside of it was offered a simple choice. Stay, and you'll never hear another television program as long as you live. Or take the NASA shilling and get out. No one stayed, and NASA ended up with exactly what it wanted. 125,000 acres of nothing. They even had to move 5 cemeteries, because the noise they were planning on making would wake the dead. Don't worry if you can't hear what I'm saying. I couldn't even hear myself. This is the loudest sound you could possibly conceive. And, as it turns out, the cleanest. Now, the most amazing thing is that that cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapor. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will actually rain. I told you! It's raining! That's unbelievable! Oh. NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather.
So that was an example of NASA's weather modifying device. They sell it as a engine testing device, but as you can clearly see, it's made to modify weather. It's known as a wet surface air cooler. These devices are all around the world and are used to manipulate and control the weather from the ground. Most of us are aware of geoengineering from the skies. We look up, we see that the skies are being painted much more. The geoengineering chemtrails include aluminum, barium, strontium, formaldehyde. They also will spray chemtrail flu to make people sick to help Big Pharma. But these wet surface air coolers, ground-based weather manipulators, it's very little discussed. Weather Wars 101, which I'll include in the show notes, is the only site I know of that is actually bringing to light these massive devices that are all over the world that are manipulating the weather at will. And as you can see from this video right here, from a ground-based to an aerial view, you can see clearly that weather is being created. Cloud formations are being created, and when they add the different devices, they can steer and move the weather. You get a little higher picture here, and you can see this is just creating these huge plumes from ground-based devices, yet geoengineering and chemtrail alternative media, except for weather wars, are lax in covering this. The devices they use to steer the weather, you've maybe seen them, they look like golf balls, are called NEXRAD, Doppler radar you see on TV, you hear on the news services. Those are the devices they use radio frequencies to steer and control the weather, but the water evaporation towers that are going up into the air are a huge part of the entire geoengineering ecosystem control, and it needs to be brought to light. Another is the Bill Gates Silver Lining Project, where they actually have devices that use seawater to spread water vapors up into the air as well.
Wherever they actually have a storm, and we've had some giant storms in the last few years, they're all man-made, and at the center of them you will find a NEXRAD tower. So what is NEXRAD? It's a form of radar. It's the new form of radar. It's Doppler-based. And the two things that weather war brings us in terms of new knowledge are the fact that these NEXRAD towers are in the very eye of these man-made storms. So that's clue number one. And clue number two, which actually goes backward in this unfolding that I'm giving you, is that we have an abundance of power plants all over the world today, not just all over the country. And I had seen these for years. I never knew what they were. I'd be driving along the freeway and I'd see these tall smokestacks and I would think to myself, factories. Yeah, those are factories. And they'd be pumping out, belching out huge amounts of what looked like pollution. Huge amounts of gray smoke, white smoke. And I'd think to myself, wow, that is a busy factory. What does it make? And I would think, why aren't people screaming about this ugly stuff that's pouring out of these chimneys? And I found out later from Weather War that those are not factories, they're power plants. And what they are releasing into the atmosphere is millions and millions and millions of gallons of steam. So this is a technology called WSAC, Wet Surface Air Cooler. And the operation is known as direct steam condensing for power generation using closed-loop evaporative WSAC technology. So these power plants are using water to create, again, on the surface electricity, but they're releasing huge, huge quantities of steam into the atmosphere.
Yep.
And this is the source of the water vapor for chemtrails. Now, I was staggered when I learned this. And when you see these things working at night, it's not that there's a night shift going on in factories because it's such a busy industry for whatever they're making. It's because this is the time when people are least likely to notice. And there are areas, if you look at Google Maps and you look for power plants in various cities, you'll see how they're all clustered together. In the Midwest, where they have tons of these storms and chemtrails, you will see sometimes huge power plants within a few blocks of one another. There'll be 3 or 4 of them with the tall chimneys. And Weatherwar wrote me an email in which he said, they tell us to turn off the water while toothbrushing, but meanwhile a water system traverses this country that produces enough vapor to drive a global artificial weather system.
Yep.
Just another spectacular example of the hoodwinking of the human species.
Atmospheric cooling towers. Atmospheric cooling towers use no mechanical devices to move air through the tower. A cooling tower is a heat transfer device used in industry to cool water that is used in a cooling system.
Cooling towers are shell structures built of concrete in which hot water is allowed to cool. Thereby, thermal energy is released to the environment. The most well-known form is the natural draft wet cooling tower, as shown in this animation. Natural draft wet cooling towers can be up to 200 meters tall and are made up of a cold water basin, an air inlet near the bottom of the tower, evaporates. This can be seen as plumes of steam. Natural draft wet cooling towers function according to the simple principle of the stack effect, also known as natural circulation. Since warm air is less dense than cold air, warm air rises due to buoyancy and escapes out of the upper opening of the tower. This leads to a self-preservation of the stack effect.
Water is wet. 62,500 power plants from 2 to 240 of these wet seal air cooler blower facilities evaporating from anywhere from 18,000 gallons a minute to 700,000 gallons a minute, adding trillions of gallons of water vapor to the atmosphere and God knows how much heat, and has for the last 50 years. Very important to understand, 18,000 gallons or 700,000 gallons a minute, adding trillions of gallons of water vapor.
At the heat addition side, the burning coal produces many pollutants.
The wide range of fluid streams cooled by the WSACs in the wastewater industry include various liquids prior to biological treatment. WSAC is a preferred technology for wastewater cooling due to the ability to maintain the critical outlet temperature required for biological treatment tanks, commonly referred to as bug ponds.
It's geoengineered. This is weather war terrorism, and people need to be held accountable.
Teams will be out surveying the impact of last night's storm.
National Weather Service says as many as 6 possible tornadoes were reported on the ground.
So rain totals as high as 6 inches in
Wow.
southwestern Minnesota, several spots over 3 inches of
This is in
rain.
a couple hours, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that was kind of the interesting thing, and probably one of the biggest reasons why we don't have a ton of damage reports right now is because when those storms went through, there was so much rain, it was really difficult to pick out the rotation. Normally when we see tornadoes, it's a little bit of a drier setup, and you're able to see that funnel cloud forming kind of early in the afternoon when we saw that first one come, and then as the National Weather said, 6 more reports of tornadoes. Yeah. I'll show you the line that took. First one popped up just to the west of Lake Crystal. You can see it there. That was at about 4:20. Kept moving up north through Nicollet by about 5, bringing down tree branches. I think the biggest I saw was about 12 inches in diameter. Kept moving northward towards Gaylord, and still by 6:15, this was that heavy rain-wrapped tornado just to the west of Gaylord, and then things
How about it?
All right, so here's some couple reader comments, a few reader comments that have been coming in there. Just want to bring your attention to, I live in Portland, Oregon. The fires here are crazy. Day before yesterday, winds changed direction. I had to wear a mask because the smoke was so bad. 1/8 of an inch of ash covering my car. Fire located in the gorge. Only 7% contained. 44 years old, lived here my whole life. Never had to wear a mask. I've been trying to do the math. I do not understand how an island in the eye of the storm pummeled by Barbuda, 60 miles away from St. Thomas, which sustains much less damage. Just like Puerto Rico. The storm system is reportedly the size of France. The storm would be almost 500 miles from end to end. How is it missing locations very close together? It was 2 days travel from St. Bart's to the coast of San Juan, 211 miles away. The state of emergency was called on Monday, though it was 5 or more days off, and they're predicting very specific outcomes. How do they know? Because they're making it.
Around the world, it was the warmest ever recorded. And the fact that the climate is changing has very serious implications for the way we live now.
Well, scientists say climate change is getting worse, and there could be serious consequences for our planet in the next 20 years.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says it's time to get serious about keeping ambitions high on climate action and on building resilience.
With science forecasting a dramatic rise in both the frequency and severity of disasters, it's time to get serious about keeping ambitions high on climate action and on building resilience and reducing disaster risk.
It's really cold out. And right on cue, Twitter has been overrun with climate deniers cracking tired jokes about global warming. But beyond social media jabs lies a serious and ongoing discussion about how scientists connect extreme weather to underlying climate change.
As I said in a press conference yesterday, we have seen unprecedented mobilization of the world community. People are taking it seriously, and we have a chance actually to solve this problem if we act forcefully and quickly.
And you have made it a serious part of your agenda. And you did say in the State of the Union that no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change.
David Miller joins me here in Toronto. He is an ambassador for inclusive climate action at C40. What's your reaction to the numbers in this report that we're actually double the global rate?
Well, it's grim, it's serious. If you've been involved with this issue for a long time, as I have, it's sadly not a surprise.
Al Gore is here with us in Studio 57, and we're very pleased to have him. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So tell me, in 10 years, what has changed that alarms you?
Well, there have been two big changes, Charlie, in the last decade. Number one, the climate-related extreme weather events have become way more serious, way more common. Superstorm Sandy here flooded the War Memorial 9/11 site, for example.
And I go wrong to basic guidelines. I got mine as an example every time, and this one I think I can go by.
Yeah. I mean, it's little things like after an exclamation point, you need two spaces and then capital, but after a semicolon, only one space. Not like, where's that shit written?
It isn't. It's just
not
no.
tongue in quote. What's that? It's not a tongue. Probably, but no quotes.
When we go to ALS and we do our EPR, not EPR, but our bullets over there, it is absolutely, without a doubt, not anything like the bullets you put on a real EPR. The bullets over there are 2 lines. It's 2 lines. Each bullet is 2 lines long, and it's like...
We don't do that.
No.
I spray my chemtrails at night so I can work all night and hide from prying eyes. I spray my chemtrails at night so I can draw
Water surface air coolers are all over the world and come in many sizes and many shapes. You've seen them in the nuclear power plants, and you've seen them in some of the industrial complexes, and they're all being used to manipulate the weather around the world, since we do not have any more normal weather, nor have we had normal atmospheric nature's weather for over a couple decades at least, which I'll get into in a little bit. So as you can see from these images, not only are they using tons and tons of water to create water vapor while telling us we're in a water drought, but they're also using effluents from our waste to spread up into the air, along with all the other coal and crap that goes through these machines that are all, as I said, are all around the world. So as you can see, these water surface air coolers are being used to manipulate the weather. We can see it in so many different places, and so many different styles, and so many different shapes. And what I find absolutely astounding is the geoengineering and chemtrail community that has been active for over 10 years has not even addressed this issue, except for Weather Wars 101 and Sophia Small Storm. So this is a whole new avenue for geoengineering and for the chemtrail activists to get involved with and start discussing how wet surface air coolers, WSAC, are a huge part in the entire weather manipulation closed loop system, using chemtrails, barium salt to activate the clouds so the water vapors can interact, and then the NEXRAD, Doppler, HAARP facilities, radio frequencies to steer the weather. And here you can see it's like the Home Depot of water surface air coolers. That's how prevalent these all are.
The heated up water from the condenser outlet is sprayed in the cooling tower, which induces a natural air draft, and the sprayed water loses heat. This is how a colder liquid is always provided at the condenser inlet.
So its critical part of the operation is that water, when it's released from these cooling towers, is some 10 to 15 to even 20 degrees cooler than it is at ambient temperature on ground level. This is an example using a simple ice inside a water chest and a blower to show how water can be cooled using air over a cooler surface. This helps cool the air to create rainwater above in the skies.
The amazing thing is that that cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapor. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will actually rain. It's raining! That's unbelievable! Oh. NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather.
All right, so this is the effect of cooling towers on the atmosphere. This is from Weather Wars 101. He's citing a 1971 Zion nuclear power plant study on the effects of cooling towers on the atmosphere and weather. There are, as he states here, 62,500 of these power plants worldwide. Also, the wet surface air cooling farms that could only have one conceivable purpose, known as WSAC. All right, if we scroll down, this is the study, the effect of cooling tower effluents on atmospheric conditions in northeastern Illinois. It was done in 1971. So the study shows that it was already known back in 71 that massive amounts of water vapor from even one nuclear power plant with 4 cooling towers would have significant effects on the atmospheric conditions and weather. So here's a different independent study confirming that wet surface air cooling systems began around 1971. It says here the waste heat removed by the cooling system during the steam condensation step must ultimately be transferred to the surrounding environment. The high heat unit capacity water has been the traditional transfer medium of choice because its relative availability, inexpensive, and reusable. Wet cooling systems use water to absorb heat via indirect contact with steam and a condenser. The heated water is either discharged to a large surface water body such as a river or lake, or passed through a cooling tower and recycled back. In either case, heat absorbed in the condenser is released to the environment through a combination of evaporation and sensible heating of their surroundings. Prior to 1990, virtually all steam electric power plants used wet cooling systems. And then it goes on to say, down here a little further, that however, in the early 1970s, new steam electric generation began using recirculated cooling. And here's a list of extensive patents on geoengineering and aerosol spray. And this seems to validate and further confirm that the wet surface air coolers were rolled out in 1971. I mean, look at all these patents that were taken out. Methods of treating atmospheric conditions by intermittent dispersants of materials, weather modification methods. So it does seem to indicate that wet surface air coolers are a major component developed starting in 1971 after the Mount Zion study. It is impossible to find a power plant of any fuel type that has no wet surface air coolers whatsoever. Fog potential, this is from the Zion study, fog potential was calculated for mechanical natural draft towers and pure natural draft towers of 350 and 500 feet. Certainly, large quantities of heat released to the atmosphere will result in an increase in convection, turbulence, and cumulus clouds. So Weather Wars goes on to state, so what happened to all these concerns from 1970? They disappeared from the scientific community and from society as a whole, while simultaneously being developed as the foundation of the global engineering process. He says, we have 50 years of evidence of this reality. The very serious concerns raised by the Zion power plant study were enough to prevent their use on environmental reasons for that one plant. But subsequently 7,000 power plants in the United States and 62,500 power plants worldwide. The potential impact of that one power plant that was deemed too great a risk to the environment now exists 62,500 times over. A Carson 1970 study states that extra heat and water vapor from cooling towers may create cumulus clouds, and that possibility of tower plumes acting as trigger to produce extra cumulus congestus clouds and precipitation miles downwind of the release must be considered. There are frequent occasions when tower plumes can be seen to evaporate and then recondense to some extent at higher altitudes further downwind. Under stable conditions with higher humidities, the plumes will persist after leveling off and appear downwind as stratus cloud covered and merge and reinforce existing cloud cover. So you see how they're altering the clouds here. So here's how it works. In order to create a rainstorm then, for instance, all we need to do is start the cloud system with a water vapor, release from a power plant A, wait until that initial cloud of water vapor reaches station B, then continuing the feeding clouding system with water vapor releases from station B. Wait until that more developed cloud system reaches station C, then continue feeding the cloud system with water vapor releases, and so on until the system reaches saturation and drops the accumulated water vapor as rain. From a climatological observations and cloud physics research, it is known that cumulus clouds and rain showers of thunderstorms can be triggered by relatively small inputs of energy. This is critical to understand. And a Shangon 1968 about has shown that areas downwind of Chicago had experienced 20 to 40% increases in precipitation due to urban industrial effects. Measurements of cooling tower plume profiles indicate that humidity increases can be detected for many miles downwind. It is quite evident that any severe weather event resulting from cooling tower effluence could be attained only through a triggering or stimulation effect. That is, the additional heat and or moisture fed into the developing storm cloud could conceivably produce an imbalance that could result in its intensification into a severe weather state. Okay?
Let's look at the science of rain and how raindrops form. First, we'll need the sun. When the sun shines on water on the Earth's surface, the heat of the sun warms the water, turning it into an invisible gas called water vapor. This process, the changing of water into a gas, is called evaporation. Because gases are lighter than liquids, water vapor rises up into the sky. And the further you move up and away from the Earth's surface, the colder the temperature gets. So in the sky, the water vapor cools and changes back into tiny water droplets. This change is called condensation and is the opposite of evaporation. Clouds are made up of tiny water droplets, so when condensation occurs in the sky, clouds form and grow. Let's take a closer look. When water droplets bump into one another, they stick together and grow in size. They continue to grow until they are too heavy and fall as rain. They even grow as they bump into one another on their journey from the cloud to the ground. And every single raindrop that reaches the ground is made up of 1 million of the original tiny water droplets. Raindrops fall on the ground surface where the sun can shine on them, and the whole process happens again. This is called the water cycle and keeps water moving from the ground to the sky, providing the water needed for plants, animals, and people to survive.
So to be very clear, the hydrological cycle of ocean water makes the rain. Rain comes from the ocean's activities, or used to come from the ocean activities. Air currents enter water vapors into the atmosphere, and then the water vapors condense into small particles that are known as cloud condensation nuclei, or CCN. This particulate matter are less than a micron in diameter. They're extremely small. The condensation takes place just like water vapors condense on a saucepan's lid when water is boiled in it. In that same way, water vapors condense when they collide with the cloud condensation nuclei. Now, warm air can hold more water than cool air. But if the air, warm or cool, is holding half as much moisture as it can hold when saturated, the relative humidity is 50%. This is the temperature below which the air can no longer hold the moisture in vapor form, and liquid water or dew will form and rain is created.
The hot water in the kettle gives off water vapor to the air by rapid evaporation, just as rivers, lakes, and ponds give off water vapor to the air by slow evaporation. As the hot water-filled air hits the colder air near the ice tray, the water vapor turns into clouds of tiny water droplets floating in the air, condensation. When the air is quite cold and cannot hold any more water droplets, they collect together to form larger drops, as on the ice tray. And being too heavy to float in the air, they fall back to the earth as rain.
Dane Wigington at Geoengineering Watch and Weather Wars have got into a pissing match in a big way about these water cooling towers, and this is what Dane Wigington at Geoengineering Watch has to say about these cooling towers. Sophia, this is Sophia Smallstorm, on a Red Ice Radio interview about the cooling towers, Dane sent her a note and said, "I had your recent interview with Red Ice sent to me. Just wanted to give you an FYI. Well, Dane also goes on to say that he worked on cooling towers 30 years ago down in Daggett Valley. Apparently, according to his brother, he was a subcontractor for Bechtel working on electrical solar panels, and would not have had any information, or if he did, it would have been secondhand from the architects and the engineers. But he was not an engineer. He was not a designer. Yet he goes on to claim that he was an expert on these cooling towers and can assure us that if we do the math, that this cannot be possibly true, though massive, massive amount of evidence is showing us otherwise. So just to button this up, this is just Google searching nuclear power plant water vaporization, water modification, and vapor generator for weather modification. This document is easily online on Google. Anyone can search it. Anyone can find out about wet surface air cooling towers being used all over the world. So why Mr. Wigginton cannot find for himself, who's been studying intimately, has intimate knowledge of water cooling towers, this patent, or many of the others, is beyond my ability to comprehend at this point. I worked on cooling towers for Bechtel in California. They can only put out enough steam to form a small cloud just over the facility. Do the math on 2 inches of rain over even a small geographical area. It's a massive amount of water. I know what I'm speaking about on this issue. I have worked on cooling towers, he says. Well, that's all I got for now. This has been quite a journey learning about this. I thought I understood geoengineering, but I found that you've got to check your sources, and you can't just trust a single source for anything. Do your homework. Research for yourself. I'll put show notes in here. But please look into wet surface air coolers. Look into NexRad. Look into barium salts. You'll see. And hopefully this video has helped put together for those with a little more advanced knowledge on geoengineering. They add in this full system, complete system managed from the clouds using the salts and the aluminums to interact with the cloud vapors from the massive, massive machines that are everywhere and portable and highly, highly easily produced. Look at how much massive weather they have to manipulate. They do it for decades now, folks. We're just waking up to that. How scary, how exciting, how fun, how horrifying for our children. We have to wake up now. I'm not sure we can change any of this, but waking up is the first part of any journey. And if you want to go in the comment sections, I'll leave them open, be civil, but please put this together. You're not going to get it from these alternative websites. Think for yourself. And here's some NASA strategy, NASA being their own entity of a corporation, corporation. They have war strategies. This is from a gentleman named Bushnell, Dennis Bushnell, in 2005, I believe, and it's his slideshow presentation talking about how they look at the future. And did you know NASA was a military operation, part of the Department of Defense?
Look at the sky this morning. It just doesn't look real. It's crazy. Isn't that really crazy? I got this on time lapse as well. It's like a painting. See how the different lines converging there?
guys, look at the sun I have today. Tuesday, 2/20/2018, Walpole, Mass. I mean, really? This is what we're looking at today? I mean, when you look up at the sun, you don't see this, it's just bright. But when you record it, it's just crazy.
Okay, so if we scientists are so good at making these dire long-term predictions about the climate, how come we're so lousy about predicting the weather? Besides, this year, we had a colder winter in my town. For all the scientists know, we could be in for global cooling. Here's the difference between weather and climate. Weather is what the atmosphere does in the short term, hour to hour, day to day. Weather is chaotic, which means that even a microscopic disturbance can lead to large-scale changes. Climate is the long-term average of the weather over a number of years. It's shaped by global forces that alter the energy balance in the atmosphere, such as changes in the sun, tilt of the Earth's axis, the amount of sunlight the Earth reflects back to space, and the concentration of greenhouse gases in the air. A change in any of them affects the climate in ways that are broadly predictable. My friend's meandering represents the short-term fluctuations. That's weather. It's almost impossible to predict what will attract his interest next, but not hard to know what the range of his meandering will be, because I'm holding him on a leash. We can't observe climate directly. All we see is the weather. The average weather over the course of years reveals a pattern. I represent that long-term trend, which is climate. Keep your eye on the man, not the dog. Weather is hard to predict, like my friend here, but climate is predictable. Climate has changed many times in the long history of the Earth, but always in response to a global force. The strongest force driving climate change right now is the increasing CO2 from the burning of fossil fuels, which is trapping more heat from the sun.
Lethal poison, yes, they spray to steal away, or so they say. I used to love to see the bright blue sky.
You know what is a chemtrail?
The what?
A chemtrail.
I do know what a chemtrail is.
Yeah, and is it true?
Well, there's a big debate.
Yeah.
Are you filming me?
Maybe. Okay. No.
I want to go on record with that.
Okay. No, but do you believe it? I don't think not.
Well, I don't have enough information for that.
Okay. Yeah, but because I saw a lot of videos on the internet, and it really looks believable.
Well, it's arguable both ways, I think.
Yeah?
Depends on which side you're on, but...
Yeah. But what is your personal opinion of it?
I think there's part of truth.
Part of truth, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we should investigate this, because when it's true, imagine so many people, they suffer of this.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil, as you could say.
Gone into them.
They're all worked up today.
We've found something extraordinary. Extraordinary and disturbing, that is. You recall what you said about how polar melting might disrupt the North Atlantic current?
Yes.
Well, I think it's happening.
Folks, we've hit some unusual turbulence. We've encountered a cloud layer that's abnormally high.
You all right?
He's afraid of flying.
The government has to start making long-term preparations now.
Jack, all you have is a theory.
This raining like this for 3 days now.
Mr. Vice President, if we don't act now, it's going to be too late.
I'm afraid that time has come and gone, my friend.
What can we do?
Save as many as you can.
The storm is just going to get worse. What should we do? I will come for you. Do you understand me?